Nobody, and I mean nobody in the NBA relishes the villain role more than this man, Draymond Green. He and Steve Kerr sarcastically calling Boston fans classy after the Game 3 loss last night. He was the first also, I'll give him credit here, first to admit he played like crap in Golden State's loss to the Celtics, who now have a 2-1 series lead. 2 points, 4 boards, 3 apples, 1 block, fouling out with 4 minutes to play in the game. All right, so not an X factor last night, but good morning, everybody. Good to have you here on a Thirsty Thursday edition of The Sweat, presented by DraftKings. I am Emerson Lotzius, so we got MLB DFS picks coming up. Same for the NHL, which, by the way, the Rangers and Lightning will clash in Game 5 tonight. That series tied at 2. And how about some football news, because there's a lot of it coming out right now with minicamps and OTAs going on around the NFL. But let's get cooking right now with our NBA panel. It is consisting this morning of Nick Fryer, Jeff Pratt. We also have Mr. Nick Whalen here of RotoWire. Hey, what was the biggest reason for the Celtics winning last night, Fryer?
I mean, it was clearly the Celtics fans trash talking Draymond Green the entire time, because obviously it really affected him. You know, I want to point out where Klay Thompson was upset and where Steve Kerr was upset. Draymond said, this is what I expected. He knew what he was getting into. He knows how to handle it. So I just think it's a bad look for everybody else involved outside of Draymond. But, you know, of course, he did play poorly. Either way, the big thing was, I think the X factor was Robert Williams in this game. Yeah. As much as Tatum, Brown, and Smart all did their scoring thing, Robert Williams did all the little things. Was it 4 blocks, 3 steals, 10 rebounds? So, and then plenty of stuff that doesn't show up on the stat sheet. So gave you a little bit in fantasy, but more importantly, he was a big part in Celtics winning.
Yeah, what do you think here, Whalen? I mean, Warriors lost, but like Klay Thompson might be back, which would be huge for them the rest of this series.
Yeah, Klay looked great. He was, a big part of the reason they were able to kind of shoot themselves back into this game, but then he went cold down the stretch. Once the Warriors essentially tied it back up, both Curry and Thompson struggled in the fourth quarter, and Boston was kind of able to re-pull away. The biggest thing that stood out to me, and it honestly felt like more. I think the final offensive rebounding numbers were 15-6 in favor of Boston, but it felt like all 15 of those rebounds were just massive for the Celtics. Even the ones that came early on, they all kind of led to really good second shot opportunities. I thought Golden State just wasn't doing a good job of boxing out. I thought Klay Thompson and Andrew Wiggins, especially, there were a number of instances where they're just not getting a body on anybody. They're kind of sitting there watching, trying to out jump guys, and I think Boston, generating 15 second chance opportunities throughout the game is what stood out most to me. The other thing, that Golden State just can't get to the rack against this Boston team. You watch, it seems like everybody on the Celtics is able to get into the lane and either finish, make a pass to the corner, drop it down to Williams or Horford. Like, Golden State is really, really struggling to generate good looks that aren't jump shots and aren't, coming out of the fast break. So I think Boston's defense and Boston's offensive rebounding are what won them Game 3.
Yeah, Jeff, Boston's 16 rebound edge on the glass. It was evidence of like a forceful response here to Golden State's blowout victory in Game 2.
Absolutely. I mean, the rebounds were huge. For me, watching the Celtics throughout the entire postseason, turnovers are what killed them. They would repeatedly beat themselves by just giving the ball away. And what happened last night? Well, they stopped turning the ball over when it mattered, and the defense stepped up in a huge way. It was the Warriors who had 8 turnovers in the fourth quarter alone. And Boston finally figured out how to effectively run them off the perimeter and make life difficult. And then from an individual player perspective, not just Robert Williams was great, but Grant Williams was great as well. Al Horford was solid. I actually think his 11, 8, and 6 stat line makes it seem like he had a greater impact than what was actually the case. But Rob and Grant brought the defensive intensity, and they made life extremely difficult for the Warriors attacking the paint, as both Nick and Nick, there's 2 Nicks on the show today. Yep. I was going to say both names, but as both of them have talked about before. And then they were extremely aggressive on the offensive glass and attacking the paint. They brought exactly what Boston needed in this matchup.
I mean, the Celtics almost let things fall apart, too, again, in the third quarter. But Ime Udoka said that he told his team, he looked everyone in the eyes and said, stop playing like a bunch of a-holes. And then they woke up right after that. Fryer, Boston, though, now 7-0 following a loss in the playoffs. Golden State, meanwhile, is also unbeaten in the 2022 postseason following a defeat. And the Warriors have won at least one road game in their past 26 playoff series. So Game 4, Friday. What adjustment do you anticipate the Warriors making in order to try to even this series up?
I think the big thing for them is taking away the secondary scorers. They talked about it in the first game. They did it in the second game. And look, I know that it was more Marcus Smart kind of stepping up. And yes, you got some stuff from Al Horford and a few other guys. But I think when they managed to stop Boston's secondary scorers, and not only impacts those guys from putting up points, it doesn't give Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown the outlets that they're looking for in situations where they're trying to make that next pass, because that's when one of the biggest things for the Celtics throughout since they turned the corner, they have been much better about just making the next pass, trying to find that best shot, taking their time in their half-court offense. When they can't do stuff like that, they're not as efficient offensively. So, I mean, and look, if you go listen to Draymond's podcast too, he's probably going to tell you to do that too. It's not giving anything away, but that's probably what they're going to end up doing in Game 4.
Hey, Waylon, too, something to keep in mind is when Al Horford rolled over Steph Curry's, I believe it was his foot. Curry said afterwards had some pain in his foot in the fourth quarter. I mean, how much do you think a potential Steph Curry injury changes this series?
If Steph Curry is not, close to 100%, I think that tilts it probably in favor of the Celtics to a point where Golden State can't win the series. I think that's fair to say, right? Especially with how Golden State played in Game 3. I know Andrew Wiggins had 18 points, but it was relatively inefficient. He was only 1 of 6 from 3, had 3 turnovers. It's kind of been a two-man show so far. And like Nick said, Boston is getting contributions from, Marcus Smart stepping up with 24, 7, and 5, Derek White, Al Horford, Grant Williams throughout these playoffs. Golden State, I think the main difference between this team and the other, pre-Kevin Durant Warriors is, guys like Andre Iguodala, like he's a shell of what he was in 2016. Sean Livingston, Barbosa, like the great role players on those teams, they just don't really have that right now. And Jordan Poole is certainly capable of being that guy, but he's a little too inconsistent at this point. They didn't get a whole lot from him in this game. Didn't get a whole lot from Otto Porter. Gary Payton, it looks like, is not even capable of shooting a basketball right now. It's strange to watch because there's a lot of times last night where Golden State has 2 guys on the floor, whether it's Looney and Draymond, whether it's Draymond and Gary Payton, guys who just don't want to shoot the ball, are not interested in shooting the ball, and it's really bogging down their offense. So, if all of a sudden Stephen Curry is now limping around and he's at 70, 80%, I mean, he was at 100% for most of this game last night, and they ended up losing by double digits. So what does that tell you?
Jeff, the Warriors were the team to make adjustments in Game 2. Udoka and the Celtics made adjustments last night. Pressure defense. Celtics were more physical and aggressive. How do the Warriors answer back now? What's their answer to that in Game 4?
They have to do a better job on the glass. I mean, the secondary scoring is a huge issue, as both of these guys have touched on. But at the end of the day, the Warriors were out-rebounded 47-31 and then 15-6 on the offensive glass. And honestly, it felt like more. Boston is the bigger, more physical team, but there are still ways to keep them off the boards, and the Warriors need to figure that out in Game 4. I'm sure we'll see if Steve Kerr makes some lineup adjustments. We're going to get more Kevon Looney. I think that's almost a guarantee at this point. We saw that he was able to take Boston off of the boards in Game 1. Obviously, the Celtics still won that matchup, but he was a major force. Will we see some Juan Toscano-Anderson? Will we see some Jonathan Kuminga? They're going to have to roll out some bigger lineups in this matchup, especially if Steph Curry is hurt. And yes, bringing in all of those guys takes away from your secondary scoring because none of them can shoot from the outside. But at the end of the day, it doesn't matter if you can't corral the rebound off of a stop.
All right, Jeff, Tatum and Brown, we know they had big games. Curry put up game-high 31 points here. We come to expect that, though, from all of the stars from the start of this series. The difference, though, you guys have mentioned it, like Marcus Smart, some of these other role players here, those have been the X factors in these games. Who can have another big game in DFS lineups, Jeff, do you expect on Friday night? Someone besides the obvious choices here.
Yeah, I'll go right back to Marcus Smart here. It's no secret that he thrives off of energy. We talk about home court advantage for specific players. He feeds off of that Boston crowd more than anyone on the Celtics. And we saw a different level of focus and effort on both sides of the ball from him last night. On offense, he wasn't just jacking up threes. He was recognizing mismatches, attacking in the post, which is where he's incredibly effective given his size. He was just bullying Steph Curry every time he was on him. And then on defense, we saw it at the end of the game. Curry got it going in the early parts of this one, but Smart was all up in his grill throughout the entire fourth quarter. In front of the Boston crowd, he can absolutely do this again in Game 4.
Yeah, Waylon, and Klay Thompson did his best with a series high 25 points for him, too.
Yeah, Clay looked good early in this game. I mean, I think he actually started like 0 of 3 or 0 of 4, but kind of had that same level of confidence that we've seen from him throughout this series, and eventually heated up. I thought one of the key reasons that Marcus Smart was so effective in this game, and it wasn't just him for Boston, was they were really effective at targeting both Stephen Curry and Jordan Poole on the defensive end. And part of it was Curry, picking up the 2 early fouls. But I mean, Boston was just able to bully Curry over and over and over. And even if Curry didn't have the foul trouble, I don't know what he's going to do to stop Marcus Smart. I mean, he had a couple shots where he just kind of backed him down, shot right over him. Al Horford had him pinned a couple of times. So I thought Boston's role players did a really good job of seeking out those matchups and targeting them aggressively. I think Marcus Smart can continue to be effective in the series. You can kind of choose any Boston role player and make a pretty decent case for why they're a nice DFS play at a cheaper price, because virtually all these guys have stepped up at some point or another in the playoffs, whether it's Smart, Horford, Grant Williams in the Milwaukee series, Al Horford every now and then. Really any of those guys I think can step up. And on the Golden State side, I feel like maybe we see more Jordan Poole at some point. I think he's a big part of the reason that they've struggled defensively. I mean, Boston had like 125 points per 100 in this game, which is horrendous for the Golden State defense. But maybe Golden State feels like they just need to try to score with Boston, because it feels like no matter who they throw out there, they're having a tough time staying in front of the Celtics. So, maybe we see more Jordan Poole. Maybe we get an explosive Jordan Poole scoring game in Game 4.
Yeah, someone in the middle of the pack here, Fryer, that you anticipate, could step up and would be worth rostering in DFS on Friday?
So look, I love the idea of going with Marcus Smart, but when we look at these games too, I can't help but wonder about the NBA's investments in these games as well too, right? We see the refs, and I think there's whoever the analyst is for ABC is talking about, yes, they call things differently within games. And when we're looking at this game, if we think that the Warriors are going to win this game, if they're going to try and extend this series, Steph Curry's going to have to step up, Klay Thompson's going to have to too, and maybe Jordan Poole, to at least 2 of those 3 guys. So I do question how Marcus Smart is going to be called throughout the course of that game. We saw what they just did to Draymond. We kind of suspected that coming in because of the stuff he was saying. Of course, Smart's not saying the same thing, but it could still happen to him. Could happen to Derek White as well. So I'm looking at, so as much as I do think Smart might be a viable option, I'm a little more interested in the Warriors side of things. I think Kevin Looney, you guys touched on it a little bit before, they're going to need to turn to him more. So obviously when you're trying to adjust on the glass, when you're talking about the Warriors, he's really the only guy that can make that major adjustment outside of maybe Draymond Green, who, as much as he had a terrible game, and I was fading him going into Game 3, I do think in Game 4 he's going to have some semblance of a response as well. So those would be 2 guys that I'm looking at for Game 4.
Okay, so Fryer, who's got the edge in Game 4 overall? In the DK Sportsbook, Celtics will be 4-point favorites currently at home.
So I still think I'm going to take the Warriors in this one, but right now the Celtics they obviously look great. Momentum has meant nothing to them throughout the course of the postseason, whether it's good or bad. It just has not meant anything, as much as they do have back-to-back wins a few times in the past couple series. And of course they smoked the Nets in 4. But yeah, I still think part of me is still leaning towards the Warriors, just because the NBA is not going to want to see this series end in 5. It's been too entertaining through these first 3 games, even though it's been a double-digit win every single time. So right now, the Celtics look great. I think that they are mature. They've matured immensely over just the course of this postseason, never mind the entire season. But I can't help but think the Warriors are going to have to pull at least one out in Boston.
Yeah, and Waylon, Curry's status will obviously move the needle here.
Yeah, I would like to say that the series is even 2-2, and we get kind of a guaranteed at least Game 6. But the Curry thing is huge, right? I think he said after the game, it kind of feels the same as when I had my foot injured late in the regular season, which caused him to miss, I think, like 10 or 15 games to end the year. So that's not a great sign, and I think chances are he pushes through it. But like I said earlier, Curry played pretty well in this game. He didn't get injured until well after the game was pretty much decided. And Golden State still lost by double digits. It's hard to watch that game last night and then come up with a coherent argument for why Golden State will absolutely go win in Boston. I think that the Celtics team is playing really confidently. They've come out really in all 3 games. They've been the more aggressive team. They've jumped out to leads right away. And I think the play of Jaylen Brown has kind of changed everything, right? I think he was a guy that coming into this series, you still weren't quite sure exactly what you're getting, game to game with Jaylen Brown. And I think he has kind of flipped the narrative. He has been the more dominant player, I think, between he and Jason Tatum. I think when all is said and done, Tatum's probably going to have better numbers at the end of the series, but Jaylen Brown has been more aggressive. He's had the bigger kind of individual plays, it feels like. And, while Klay Thompson did kind of bounce back in Game 3, I think, you could say Curry and Tatum is kind of a wash, but the difference between Jaylen Brown and the Warriors' second best player in this series has been massive.
Yeah, Jeff, what's your early betting approach here?
The Celtics should have the edge in this game. I think both of the guys have been spot on here. They once again showcased their trademark resiliency, and then they remained undefeated coming off a loss in the playoff. But that being said, we've seen the Celtics team get really complacent coming off wins when they had a chance to take commanding leads in the postseason. Not only that, but we've seen them get really complacent at home. They have the opportunity to take a commanding lead in this series in Game 4. It's all about focus and execution on both sides. For me, from a betting angle, it's all about what we hear about Steph Curry in this one. If he really is banged up, even questionable coming into this game, I would lean towards the Celtics just because they are the better team in this matchup. And we've seen that they're able to execute. And when Curry's not hitting these ridiculous shots, getting the Warriors back in these ones, the Celtics are so close to pulling away into these contests. So if he's not 100%, I think the Celtics right now, I like them in this matchup. But if he's ready to go, he looks good heading into warm-ups, etc. The Warriors, they have enough in their arsenal to bounce back in this one.
Well, Jeff, I'm glad you mentioned that because Curry and Tatum, they entered Game 3 as plus 100 and plus 115 favorites to win MVP. Now those odds are plus 105, and that's for Tatum, and plus 205 for Curry after Game 3. Take a look at your screen. Is it still a two-man race? Or do you think maybe even Jaylen Brown has entered the chat? He was plus 900 and now plus 350.
It's absolutely not a two-man race. I think Nick Whalen did a great job of explaining it in the last question. Jaylen Brown has absolutely inserted himself in this conversation. And in my opinion, he's outplayed Tatum in this series. You know, he went for 24-6 in Game 1, 27-9-5 in Game 3. He's really stepped up shooting the ball with Tatum struggling. Right now, he's making all the individual effort plays you see that are just statement plays for the Celtics throughout these games. If Boston wins the finals, he would be my pick. Right now at MVP, I understand that Tatum's going to get the narrative, especially with everything he's going on with him, tributes to Kobe, etc. But Jaylen has been the better player throughout this series.
Yeah, Waylon, so you would obviously consider sprinkling a little something there on Brown at plus 350.
Yeah, and with all due respect to Kobe Bryant, the Tatum Kobe tributes have been a little over the top, in my opinion. I've not have not been the biggest fan.
Yeah,
of what's been going on there,
I agree. I agree. Like the texting him thing was weird. I'm not gonna lie, and I like weird stuff. That was just a little too weird.
We know you do.
Yeah, just chill out a little bit, man. But right now, I think if the vote took place after 3 games, I think it would probably be Jaylen Brown, right? I mean, he has more points. He has more rebounds, comparable in terms of defensive stats. Tatum does have more assists. Brown shooting, 10 percentage points better from the field in this series. He's been better at the line in this series. He's playing 4 fewer minutes per game. Like, I don't think it's an exaggeration at all to say that Jaylen Brown has outplayed Jason Tatum so far. That doesn't mean that he's the better player, and doesn't mean that over the course of 6 or 7 games, Tatum won't, close that gap. But I think as of right now, Jaylen Brown is a really viable choice. I don't think I would dip anywhere lower than that, or anywhere higher than that, I should say, in terms of the odds. Brown and Tatum are the co-favorites for a reason, essentially, for Boston. Like Marcus Smart, Al Horford, you would need multiple big time performances from those guys, and you'd probably need Tatum and Brown to come up short, and then Boston to still somehow win those games. Like, you start kind of talking yourself in circles when you get beyond Tatum, Curry, or Jaylen Brown.
Fryer, who would you bet for MVP right now?
Right now, I think I'd have to go with Jaylen Brown, not to sound like a broken record, but these guys did highlight it pretty well. Smart was the one long shot that I was really thinking, maybe he could if he has a nice bounce back and then kind of has, he's pretty good about getting people invested in him just because he has, the theatrics and everything that kind of come with his play. But when you look at what Jaylen Brown's done, look, Jason Tatum has been consistent. Even in that Game 1 where he didn't score all that well, he did everything else well throughout that game. Jaylen Brown, though, from a scoring standpoint, has been pretty much out there and out for blood. He is not messing around when it comes to this team. When it comes to the Warriors, he is trying to, he's pouring it on early, and that's usually when he's at his best too, when he's scoring a lot in the first quarter, then Jason Tatum kind of doing a little bit later on. So I do think Jaylen Brown's making a case, but it's just Tatum is the superstar. I could see the narrative kind of leaning towards his way, but if you're looking for someone else to put a little sprinkle on, as you put it, go with Jaylen Brown.
Yeah, I don't think many people expect Jaylen Brown to be the Finals MVP, but, here we are as of right now. Thank you, guys. Appreciate you. Mean it. Coming up, we got Jeff and Pierce. They're going to be talking NFL. It's not going to be their weekly clash. sharing their NASCAR picks. But to get you prepped for tomorrow, in which they will clash, Pierce is here breaking down DFS prices for the road course at Sonoma and the Toyota Save Mart 350.
Welcome to the Price Check. I'm Pierce Dietrich. Let's look at the salaries for Sonoma, whose salary jumped up this week. A.J. Allmendinger, $6,200 up to $8,800. No surprise, all the road course experts had a price increase. A.J. won a Cup Series road race with College last season. Austin Cindric, $6,800 up to $8,400. He's been the road course resident expert in the Xfinity Series over the last 2 seasons. He's looked good in his Cup Series road course races. Michael McDowell, $5,600 up to $7,100. It's not that bad of a price. He's an okay road racer, maybe even a good road racer, but his equipment's not the greatest. Whose salary dropped this week? Denny Hamlin, $10,600 down to $9,600. The JGR Toyotas were fast at Sonoma last season. It's just nobody had anything for Kyle Larson. Ricky Stenhouse Jr., $7,700 down to $6,800. Not really a road course racer, but with the stages and with caution, you just never know. Tyler Reddick, $9,400 down to $8,500. Last year when the green flag waved, those were his first laps ever at Sonoma. At least this year, he'll get some practice. Favorite play of the week, it's Kyle Larson, $10,600. With CGR, he was always fast at Sonoma, but he just lacked long run speed. He had long run speed with Hendrick last season, and he absolutely smoked the field. Chris Buescher, $6,100. He's one of the most underrated road course racers in the series. Don't know how he gets it done, but at the end of the race, he is always there. All right, guys, check out DK Nation for all your DFS information and needs. If you got NASCAR questions, find me on Twitter at Race for the Prize. I'm Pierce Dietrich. Catch me on DK Live.
Eastern Conference Finals are in the NHL. That returns tonight. So we got the Rangers back home inside Madison Square Garden. Series tied at 2 against the Lightning. Let's ask these guys some very important, potentially award-winning questions. RotoWire's AJ Scholes, Paul Bruno. We got Pete Jensen here of NHL.com. Before we get to the showdown contest here, guys, let's just keep it simple. We kind of had a feeling the Lightning might hold serve on home ice. I mean, both teams really getting it done when they're in the friendly confines of their home. What's the key for the Rangers, do you think, to bounce back tonight, Paul? They've been damn good at home this postseason.
Boy, oh boy. There's a laundry list of things the Rangers have to look after, though, Emerson. The Lightning certainly scared them straight, I'll say, with the last 2 games after the Rangers may have thought, oh, we got the champs by the throat. Well, tonight, Shesterkin must continue his high level of play. He's up over 93% save percentages, about 8 of his last 9 starts. The Rangers need to start on time. They need to score first. They gave up a couple of leads earlier in this series, and it cost them. They can't afford that to happen again, but if they fall behind, they're in really big trouble. They have to match the physicality of Tampa, and that's been a real challenge for any team that Bolts have played in the playoffs. And finally, they got to win the secondary scoring battle. The Rangers are really relying on that top line to carry their offense, and I don't know that they can do that much longer.
Yeah, AJ, we're seeing a clear separation here now from like shift to shift because the Lightning didn't allow a single goal against at even strength across 2 games in Tampa Bay.
Well, it's pretty early for Paul to be wrong, but there's not a laundry list of things that need to be fixed here. There's one thing that they have to do, the Rangers that is, and that's to get to Andre Vasilevsky. In the first 2 contests, the Rangers had 21 high-danger chances against Vasilevsky compared to just 2 in the last 2 road contests. If they can get those opportunities back up at MSG, they'll have a chance to take a lead heading back to Tampa for Game 6. It's all about the Rangers getting to Vasilevsky and increasing those high-danger chances.
Okay, Pete, how do you feel about tonight, man? Because now the Rangers, too, a little more beaten up. Couple key guys that are game-time decisions tonight.
Yeah, definitely with Hedl and Ryan Strome uncertain, it makes the Rangers' chances a little bit more bleak. But again, I think this falls on the Rangers' possession numbers. Right now, they're pretty bad this postseason, minus 178 shot attempts differential, worst in the playoffs in the league right now. All year long, they were kind of a team with middle of the road to poor analytics on their side, but they've gotten by because of relying on Shesterkin. How about stepping up to the plate here and surrounding him with success to give yourself a chance to actually finish off the back-to-back defending champions? Because nobody's been able to do that. And in order to do so, you're going to have to dictate the possession a little bit better. They did a better job of that at home, so they do have a chance of doing that here. But again, when the going gets tough, especially if Tampa Bay gets Braden Point back at some point in this series, I don't really like their chances. I've kind of felt all along this season that this kind of lack of possession dominance would come back to bite them, and it seems to be happening right now.
Yeah, well, Paul, as for tonight and like DFS, who do you think you're going to captain right now? What's your mindset? You got the two net miners as the most expensive dudes on the slate.
Before the last game that was played in this series, I said I have to go with Vasilevsky possibly. He's done that thing where he goes to another level in the playoffs. Only 3 goals scored against him in the last 2 games, negating the impact of the goalie at the other end of the game of the ice, who's clearly the New York's best MVP. And then getting the winning goalie for those extra points to get the W tonight. That's where I think the money is in terms of the DFS play this evening. And I mean, I'll remind my partner that I tweeted that out and then I put the final score in for that game. It was 4-1, wasn't it? And my tweet shows that score 2 hours before that puck drop. I'm going to say it's 3-1 tonight. Book it.
All right, AJ, have at it.
Yeah, I'm just gonna keep it with what I went in the last game, and that's Nikita Kucherov here. There's no reason to get overly fancy with it. 14-7 is the price tag here. He's got goals in 3 straight games, plus another 3 helpers. And if you pay, quote unquote, pay down for Kucherov, you can afford to get some other guys in your lineup. If it were at home, I'd be with Paul on the Vasilevsky call. I agreed with him the other day. I'm not as confident here in MSG. He did struggle in those first 2 games, 9 goals allowed on 62 shots. So for me, I think I'd rather go Kucherov here. Maybe still keep Vasilevsky in as a player, but not as my captain.
All right, Pete, who are you deciding to spend 1.5 times the salary on, but receiving 1.5 times the points in return?
I want my captain to be Adam Fox here because he has points in all 9 Ranger home games this postseason. You could definitely attribute their 8-game home winning streak to him and him driving play on both ends of the ice and helping out Shesterkin. He's one of the best players helping his cause on a nightly basis. We all talk about Cale Makar's dominance out west for the Avalanche and how he's one of the front runners for the Conn Smythe right now. But if the Rangers somehow get by Tampa Bay, I think there's a case in terms of consistency for Adam Fox to win the Conn Smythe, maybe even over Igor Shesterkin because of his body of work and his consistency. He has had at least a point in 15 of the Rangers' 18 games this postseason. So you're not going to get better lineup lock territory than that.
All right, so maybe you like Shesterkin to stack with Fox?
That's tough. I mean, I was definitely looking at a Tampa Bay stack because I feel a lot more confident in that group. And AJ obviously mentioned Nikita Kucherov. I like his line mate on the other wing, and I would stack those two if you can find the salary cap space. Andre Palat tied for 5th in even strength points this postseason in the league. Also tied for 3rd in even strength goals. This power forward is creating matchup problems for the New York Rangers. And I think that he's delivering in the big spots. We saw the Kucherov to Palat connection at the tail end of Game 3, and he seems to just be a thorn in their side right now. So Andre Palat kind of planning to ride the hot hand with him in my mock lineup with Kucherov, and also having Adam Fox in the mix, like I mentioned, as the captain.
All right, what do you want to do here, AJ?
Well, I think Pete's right on with that, and I would really go Palat and Stamkos. You can fit both guys into your lineup tonight with Kucherov as a captain. So I go that whole line. As you mentioned, both Stamkos and Palat have 5 points in this series, and you get to double down when you get Stammer and Kucherov on that number 1 power play. The only hesitation you might want to take with this is if Braden Point plays, there's a chance it could shuffle up this line combination. So I would definitely check back. Unfortunately, we might not know until closer to warm-ups for what those line combos would be. Great place to look for those, rotowire.com.
All right, Paul, hook me up with someone you want to stack with your captain.
Definitely has to be Steven Stamkos. I love the possibility of getting Stamkos, Kucherov, and Vasilevsky in my lineup. And then that leaves me to think, who do I bring in from the New York Rangers? And with the injuries that they've got up front, I think you got to look at a guy like Barclay Goodrow, who could step up in terms of ice time and opportunity, moving into a top 6 role. Add in the fact that he used to play with Tampa, and he knows what they bring to the table in terms of physicality. He plays with the same style. This could be a real platform for him to show his value to his new team as well as remind his old club.
Well, Pete, we've just mentioned like Strome and Hedel here, game time decisions for New York, and Tampa coach John Cooper also, as we've mentioned, has not ruled out Braden Point either, despite him missing the last round and not even suiting up in the conference final yet. Which player do you think, if they do play, has the most potential tonight?
I think it's Braden Point. I mean, the other guys will work against the Rangers if they're out. But, I mean, it's amazing that Tampa Bay, since Point went down, is somehow 7-2, dating back to Game 7 against the Toronto Maple Leafs, where, of course, they were able to withstand his injury. But Braden Point is a game breaker. He's their best closer. If he comes back in this series, I just don't see the Rangers winning it. That's how I've felt all along. It would be a bonus, like John Cooper said, if he does appear in this series. Braden Point has the most goals of any player in the NHL postseason over the past 3 playoffs combined. So there's your answer. Pretty a lot of conviction there, right?
Yeah, I mean, AJ, what do you think? Which one would you be quick to put in your DFS lineups?
Pete's right on again. I mean, it's absolutely Braden Point. Now, I will say I feel the least confident about him playing. John Cooper's comments were pretty vague earlier in the week, and I would expect more a Game 6 or Game 7. But whenever he's in, he is the biggest DFS pump up value of all 3 of those guys. Of the 2 Rangers, it's got to be Strome. He'll have the bigger DFS impact over Hedel here. Second line guy for them when available. He's averaging over 3 minutes of power play ice time during the playoffs. So of those 2, Strome should have the bigger impact. But if all 3 guys are playing, Braden Point for sure.
I mean, Paul, can you make a case here for Strome or Hedel?
No, listen, let's be reminded that Point is the top point getter for the 2 cup runs that this team enjoyed. That's what they're missing. If they can get him back, that's a hell of a boost to this lineup. Certainly, you got to look at the other side and say, if they're missing one or both of their second and third line centers, that means, of course, the pressure's on Goodrow to deliver the goods. And he's not been used to that role. So a lot of pressure on the New York side of things, whereas Tampa can say, look, we've come this far without arguably our most important offensive piece over the last 3 playoff seasons.
All right, guys, appreciate the help. This has definitely been one of the best series we've seen so far, and an enormously entertaining playoffs as well. I think we can all agree on that. Appreciate you guys. We're going to talk some MLB, some DFS picks for tonight coming up right after this. All right, guys, look at this photograph here. Look at this graphic on your screen. Jake Cronenworth last night, 36 points. Dude had his third home run his last 5 games. Scott there, little Bryson Scott Stott sandwich on your screen, $2,400. We call that affordable. And we call DraftKings contributor Gary Thornton and Steve Buchanan, our MLB panel this morning, here to cover the bases. Steve, the Angels last night walking out to the plate with Nickelback songs. That didn't quite work out for him, did it?
No, and weird choice. But for a franchise that can't get anything together, I would expect such a rash decision to be made.
Was it 14 straight losses for him now, Gary? And can you imagine wasting Shohei Ohtani and also Mike Trout continuously?
We don't have to imagine it. It's happened since 2014. This is the Angels. They have like 5 of the best 25 players in baseball at some point, and then they basically ruined the career of Albert Pujols and not Nolan Arenado, but like they've taken these guys who were great players. They go to Los Angeles and they just die. It's
Rendon.
strange.
What'd you say, Steve?
Anthony Rendon. I think
Anthony
that's what he was trying to talk
yeah.
about. Yes.
Also, can I say Nickelback's not actually that bad?
I agree. Why? And now, Steve, I saw you making the face. Listen, are they like my first pick from like the 90s or like early 2000s, like rock bands there? Like, no, but I do think they catch more crap than they actually deserve. Gary, you're absolutely right on this.
Thank you.
Steve, you don't.
No, not at all.
Okay.
I'd rather listen to like the Venga Boys or something.
All right, let's get to tonight. Let's cover the bases here. Let's get the top plays for tonight's slate. First base, Steven, who's your favorite pitcher in DFS tonight?
I'm thinking Gary's going to be on the same pitcher that I am, but this is just how it is. But I think Max Fried going against the Pirates is where you start all your lineups going tonight. This is one of the worst teams in the league against lefties. They strike out a ton against lefties. Coming into tonight, 24% K rate. That's the 7th highest in the league against lefties. 89 WRC plus. That's one of the lowest in the league. And even though Max Fried his strikeout numbers haven't been as strong as we've seen in the past, and he's not striking out a batter of an inning, he's still pitching extremely well because he doesn't give up really any type of production. So even though those strikeouts haven't been as abundant as we've seen in the past, he makes up for it by not giving up any runs. It's kind of like a Sandy Alcantara, who we saw yesterday going against the Nationals, 9 shutout innings and had no decision in that game. Only struck out 6, but the fantasy points were there because he gave up absolutely nothing. He scattered 6 hits. That's kind of the pitcher that Max Fried has been for the Braves so far this season. Give me him against the Pirates, who just can't hit lefties at all at this rate.
I mean, Gary and Steve anticipated you guys kind of be on the same page here. Is that the case?
I mean, look, Fried's great. The Pirates have the highest strikeout rate in baseball across the last 2 weeks. Garrett Cole brings a level of strikeout upside that no other pitcher on this slate can match. But I'm going to go right back to that Red Sox-Angels game and just keep picking on the Angels. I mean, look, they were cursed by a Canadian last night in Chad Kroger. He couldn't save him. And I think Nick Pivetta is going to pick up right where Chad Kroger left off. Pivetta in his own right has been fantastic in his past 6 starts. He's got a 1.32 ERA in that span of time. He's holding opponents to a 2.12 WOBA in that span. His strikeout rate hovering around 24%. That is above average. But the Angels, I mean, if the Tigers and the Athletics didn't exist, they would be the worst offense in baseball in virtually every category in the last 2 weeks. And things aren't getting a lot better. I mean, they lost Taylor Ward earlier this week. Mike Trout is a huge question mark for this game. Sat out last night with that groin issue. If Trout's not in this lineup, it's bad. It's a terrible lineup without Mike Trout in the heart of it. So yeah, I'm just going to keep going back to the Angels and picking on them until it stops working.
All right, well, nice little segue here because now I'm going to ask you for your best hitter in DFS as we approach second base, Garion.
Yeah, this one I'm going to go with the Yankees because Dylan Bundy has been as terrible by himself as the entire Los Angeles Angels organization, which is funny because he used to pitch for the Angels. His last 6 starts, 8.44 ERA. He is giving up a 350, 392, 625 slash line to opposing hitters in that span of time. So I'm just going to take the best hitter in baseball, who's not priced as the highest hitter on this slate, and that's Aaron Judge. He's still 6K. Don't get me wrong, he's expensive. But considering he is 100th percentile expected WOBA and 100th percentile expected slugging, Aaron Judge should probably just be the most expensive player on every single slate he's on. He's not. He's going up against a terrible pitcher, so I will take Aaron Judge.
I mean, he is playing like the best player in the world right now, Steve.
No doubt, and that's fine. No issue with going with Judge, but I'm going with Matt Olson going up against JT Brubaker tonight. Matt Olson hasn't been hitting the home runs at the rate that I think all of us expected, but he's making up for it because he is a doubles machine so far this year. You look at the numbers that he's been putting up. You know, I mentioned that the home runs aren't there, but you look at the doubles that he's put up. I mean, at this rate, 24 doubles on the season. That's one of the highest in the league. And now he's going up against a righty, and that's where he's been absolutely mashing this season. 378 WOBA, 236 isolated power. Now he's going up against JT Brubaker, who struggles against lefties. That's kind of the kryptonite for him. A 342 WOBA against them, 5.22 FIP, and a 1.6 home run over 9 innings. So this would be a great spot for Olson to, maybe add to those home run numbers that we haven't seen so far this year. But getting the doubles has been something that he's been doing all season long. And against somebody who's giving up a ton of extra base hits in Brubaker, I think Matt Olson in the heart of this Braves lineup, which is absolutely on fire right now, by the way. They just put a ton of runs up against the Athletics yesterday. I think this is a great spot for Olson.
Yeah, leads the majors in doubles, and will be facing Brubaker for the first time in his career. Let's go third base. DFS value play, Steve.
Yeah, I think Andrew Benintendi's in a decent spot here at 3,500 going up against Jordan Lyles. We talk about how Brubaker struggles against lefties. And Andrew Benintendi near the top of the Royals lineup is a good spot here tonight. He hasn't been absolutely crushing it when he's at the plate or anything like that, but averaging 7.7 DraftKings fantasy points against righties so far this season. Prime spot in that Royals lineup and only 3,500. So I think that's a decent price point for somebody hitting as high as he does. He's got speed. He's got a decent amount of pop, and going up against Jordan Lyles, who feels like every time he's on the mound, he's putting like 6 guys on base per inning, not giving up a ton of runs, but he's putting a lot of guys on base. And that's all we can ask for with someone like Benintendi. Just get on base, can swipe it back. He has that capability too as well. 3,500 just seems to be too low for somebody who at earlier this season was like leading the major league in batting average. So you're getting quite the discount for someone who's cooled off a bit, but can still produce at the plate.
Who do you like in value tonight for DFS, Garion?
I'm going to stick in that same game. It's kind of weird looking at a slate, and a lot of this is because of the size of the slate and because of the quality of the pitching in the other matchups. But this Orioles-Royals game actually has the highest total of any game on tonight's 5-gamer. It's odd because, well, the Royals in particular are not a blessed offensive team. But I'm going to go to the other side of this matchup with Ryan Mountcastle, who is just $3,100. We've talked a lot about guys who've been like unlucky based on their expected statistics so far this season. We think Jesse Winker is probably like the poster child for this. I think Ryan Mountcastle has a case to at least get on that same poster. He has a 399 expected WOBA in 2022. You would not think that looking at his surface statistics, which are fine, and they've definitely gotten better over the last 3 or 4 weeks, but he got off to a very rough start this season. But much like his rookie year, much like last season, a lot of that success has come against left-handed pitching. He has a 410 expected WOBA against southpaws. That is easily the highest mark on the Baltimore Orioles. And Chris Bubik, I mean, he basically had to go down to AAA to relearn how to pitch because he was that bad to start this season. He's got a 9.33 expected ERA. He's bad. And the Orioles aren't the best offensive team in the league, but they should be able to take advantage of Bubik.
All right, let's take the people home here. Favorite bet on the DK Sportsbook tonight, Steve. 5 games on the main slate.
You know, I look at this Red Sox-Angels game. You know, we have a team that's lost 14 in a row against a team that's won 7 in a row. And somehow the team that is on the losing streak is the team that's favored tonight. That's pretty remarkable. I mean, look, are the Angels going to win a game again? Yes. Is it going to be tonight? I don't know. I'll pay the even money to find out, though, at plus 100 for the Red Sox here tonight. You know, Ohtani has been great on the mound. Don't give me that. Pivetta has been phenomenal, too, as well. And like Gary mentioned earlier, if Trout is out of this lineup again, if you look at that lineup, holy hell, like, who are half of these people? I don't even know, right? It's hard to say that for somebody who works in the industry, and I can't even name 5 players in that Angels lineup last night. So with the way that Pivetta's been pitching, everything that's just been going wrong for the Angels. Like, I feel like they're inventing new ways to lose every single night at this point. I haven't won a game since May 25th. Like, it's getting absolutely out of hand. Is this the curse that's going to change it? And now they're going to win? Probably. But with that being said, I will absolutely pay the even money to get the Red Sox to win this game outright as underdogs against a team that is just losing in every way possible. So give me the Red Sox at even money tonight.
Gary Bear, what do you want on the DK Sportsbook?
I mean, I'll trail Steve on this one. I'll give another bet too, but like it's kind of crazy that like Luis Rengifo went on the paternity list yesterday, and that was like, wow, the Angels just lost their 3rd best active hitter, and I don't even really know who Luis Rengifo is. So they are in dire times right now. And as good as Ohtani's been, his last 2 starts, they've come against really good competition in the Blue Jays and the Yankees, but he's given up 9 earned runs in his last 9 innings pitched. Hasn't quite looked like the guy he was back in April. So I have no idea why the Angels are favored in this game. I will also say I have no idea why the total in tonight's Athletics game is 9 runs. 9. I don't really have anything positive to say about Connor Pilkington or James Caprillion, but just give me the under to an Athletics game when the total is 9. They are dead last in every offensive category across the last 2 weeks. The Guardians are all right, but they also don't have any power. If you combine these two teams' home run output the last 2 weeks, they have 11. 23 other teams have more home runs by themselves than these two teams combined. I just don't know where all these runs are coming from. Maybe Cleveland pulls in Atlanta and scores 13 all by themselves, but that's about the only scenario I see because Oakland's not scoring more than like 2 runs tonight.
You two were absolutely spectacular this morning. Thank you so much for all the help with the Major League Baseball picks. We have one more block to go. We got one more break to go. We got Jeff, we got Pierce here to overreact to some NFL storylines. Yeah. All right, we got our final segment here of the show, NFL Hangover. Pierce Dietrich, Jeff Ulrich here to answer some of these questions. We're going to overreact to some NFL storylines because we got OTAs and minicamps going on right now. We got a couple interesting storylines here too. A couple contract dynamics in Arizona and Baltimore with their quarterbacks. So we got Murray wants a new contract. Lamar Jackson, he hasn't engaged with the Ravens despite the Ravens looking to get it done. So Jackson and Murray, both absent from the most recent rounds of OTAs. I mean, how concerned are you that these situations, could end up impacting their offenses, Pierce?
I'm not so concerned about them getting the contracts taken care of. Eventually it'll work its way out, but I would be a little bit worried about missing some of these OTA reps. You look back at last season with Aaron Rodgers not participating in the offseason or the preseason, and we all remember how dreadful they looked in their first game. Rodgers got it together. That offense got it together, but that was a pretty well-tuned offense. They were fine. I could see the Ravens or even the Cardinals struggling a little bit out of the gates just by not getting these reps. The Ravens has a unproven wide receiver core. They definitely need to get work with the quarterback. I mean, you can miss other people, but you can't be missing your starting quarterback. And the same thing with the Cardinals. They need to get reps between Murray and Hollywood Brown. It's not good. It's not an ideal situation. I think ultimately, when everything's said and done, things will be fine, though.
Jeff, what worries you the most about the absence of these two guys?
Yeah, so I'd have way bigger concerns if I was an Arizona Cardinal fan. I mean, I think that with Baltimore, and Pierce kind of alluded to this, like that offense, they kind of know what they're doing. I mean, it's the same head coaching staff. Lamar's been there for a few years. It's run-based anyways, so it's not really like a huge timing-based offense or anything like that. And yeah, that Marquise Brown is gone, so maybe there's some new receivers to work in, but I don't think it's that big a deal. I think that the worry would come from Arizona. No DeAndre Hopkins for the first 6 games. You've got Marquise Brown, who hasn't exactly proven himself to be the most reliable, consistent receiver in the NFL, and now you're asking him to work in with Kyler Murray. Kyler had a pretty good year last year. I see some, he's good in deep ball percentages. Deep ball percentages can be kind of like a year-to-year thing, though. Alex Smith led the league in deep ball percentage one year, just to let people know, or deep ball rating, excuse me. So, Kyler Murray is the guy I would be fearful of here. He's definitely regressing towards the end of 2021, did not have a good playoffs, and now he's got to work in new receivers. Now he's skipping time. That's not a good recipe. I could definitely see Arizona. Arizona's a team I'm fading anyways, and I could definitely see them starting slow for the simple fact that they're going to miss some of these reps.
I mean, Jeff, Alan Lazard out in Green Bay, he wants a long-term deal before he shows up to minicamp. And you know this, everyone knows this watching. Like, he's one of the few guys on this roster that actually has that, camaraderie with Aaron Rodgers, who did say, on Tuesday, he actually definitely wants to spend the rest of his career in Green Bay. But for the Packers to keep him happy, Jeff, do you feel like they got to get a deal done with Lazard?
I mean, what a flip in Aaron Rodgers. Like, a year and a half ago, we were like, he's never playing Green Bay again. Now he's content. He's like, I'm never leaving Green Bay. It's the best place on earth. I don't know.
Money talks, man. Money talks.
Maybe Shailene Woodley had something to do. I don't know. I'm just saying. But Look, as far as Lazard goes, it's funny. Like, my first inclination is it's Alan Lazard. Like, who cares? But look at the Packers depth chart, man. Like, this wide receiver core, there's a question marks. It could be a lot better than people realize if Christian Watson or Romeo Doubs comes through. But, like, you can't just put all your chips on the rookies here. Alan Lazard is a guy who caught 8 touchdowns last year. Yeah, he didn't sparkly. He actually regressed a little bit in terms of like yards per target and even catch rate. But, in the red zone, he was a pretty key guy for Aaron Rodgers. And we've seen him struggle. Like, we go back to the Tampa game and those playoffs 2 years ago. They couldn't bring down the easy, 2-point conversion. Like, Rodgers needs someone like Lazard in the red zone. I think him and Robert Tonyan going to be key figures in this offense for that purpose again this year. So I think Lazard is important to bring back for the Packers. They need some kind of stability. Like, Randall Cobb ain't it anymore. I don't even want to talk about Sammy Watkins, relying on that guy. So I think Lazard is actually a pretty pivotal figure. And I think the Packers do need to bring him back, or they may struggle a bit at the start of the year. They can't just throw these rookies into the fire and expect them to just be going off from week one.
Because we all know you can only rely on Sammy Watkins week one every season. Pierce, what do you think?
Even that's up for debate at this point. I mean, come on.
Pierce, do you think the Packers should make this a priority right now?
Did Alan Lazard forget that he's Alan Lazard? I don't even know if the people watching this know who Alan Lazard is. Even the typical DFS player, you're not even playing Alan Lazard unless you're playing Showdown. It was the only time we ever talked about Alan Lazard. Yeah, he had, 40 catches, 500 yards, 8 touchdowns. And almost all of that was a product of being on the field with Devontae Adams. And so he was the guy that was open, and Aaron Rodgers was glad to pass him the ball. How's he going to do that when he doesn't have a superstar wide receiver taking the pressure off him? Like, the only way that he is going to excel is if Watson and Watkins have an amazing season. And if the rookie and Watkins somehow has more than one good week, then they're the ones that should be paid. They're the ones that are getting it done, not Lazard. It's pretty unbelievable that Lazard is asking for more money.
Yeah,
I'm shocked.
Look at the depth chart. I'm not actually shocked that he's asking for more money. I mean, you're right. Like, he probably doesn't deserve it. But if you look at the depth chart, it's a high leverage situation for Alan Lazard. He's basically saying, do you really want to go and throw in Sammy Watkins in week one? And so
they wouldn't pay for Adams. Now they're going to pay for Lazard. If they do that, they're just out of their minds.
Well, I think a lot of people know who Demarcus Lawrence is, and he said recently that he's coming out this year to take back the Cowboys sack lead from Micah Parsons when Parsons says, they're not going to get it back. Cowboys ranked 7th here in scoring defense, 19th in yardage. You had 13th in sacks with 41. Pierce, this is a defense that people should be wary about, and especially starting quarterbacks should be a little nervous about in 2022. They had a good pass defense last season, but they just weren't really good against the big play.
They put up good numbers, and they look great on paper and on the page, but they played one of the weakest schedules in football. They play in a weak division, and they'll play in a weak division again, and I wouldn't roster any of those NFC East offenses against them because they're just not good offenses. But if there's a good offense, I have no problem attacking the Dallas Cowboys. I mean, they were just on the right side of variance with 26 interceptions. There's going to be a regression to the mean. There's just no way that they're going to have another 26 interceptions this season. You take those big plays away. They gave up plenty of yards last season. You take those big plays away, and this defense looks very human. And I won't say it's overrated. It's just, they got pretty fortunate with all of the turnovers.
Yeah, Jeff, so they ranked 3rd in quarterback rating against, 4th in pressure percentage, 1st in interceptions, also the 2nd best 3rd down defense in the league.
Yeah, I mean, it was a pretty good turnaround for the Cowboys. The first year Mike McCarthy was there, obviously the defense was just a disaster. So bringing in Dan Quinn has certainly been helpful. But I'm pretty much in lockstep with Pierce here. We don't need to get too crazy here. Yes, and look, let's bring in the fantasy aspect into it. I think for DFS, you match the Cowboys up against weaker defenses or weaker offenses, especially in the NFC. With suspect O-lines. There's going to be some 15, 20-point potential here, absolutely, because they've got a couple guys who can just rack up the sacks. They've got playmakers in the secondary. That's good. But you look at their overall, their DVOA and just the yardage allowed and what they're allowing, it's middle of the pack. It's not that good. I'm not going to be scared off a good offense, just like Pierce said. So, yeah, I expect this offense or this defense, will have a pretty solid year, but they're going to get exposed in spots too, I think. I don't think that we should go overrating them or anything like that. They got some great talent. again, from a sack perspective, I think that you should be looking at that. Their sack rate for DFS and even season long, they're going to be a good team to mix in your DST core. But, I wouldn't rate them in like a top 5 or anything like that.
All right, guys. Apologies to Pierce and the Detroit Lions. We have run out of time. That is our show today. Jeff, you and I, let's talk some. We could talk some football tonight, right? We can talk some hockey because you and I are on the slate. Let's talk about what's going on around the golf world as well.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, baby, it is.
Get our own show for that.
It is juicy and meaty. Thanks everyone for watching. We're back here again tomorrow morning, live in studio, 11 o'clock Eastern time. We'll see you then.